In this video, I'm going to discuss 5 ideas to help resolve or help improve the housing crisis that we're actually facing in Ireland at the moment. I would love to know what your ideas are as well, so please put them in the comments below and perhaps I might feature the best one of those ideas in the next video. Before we start and before we get into this, I think it's important to explain where I'm coming from. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you will know I'm pro-development. Fundamentally, I believe by restricting or stopping one form of development, you're not going to promote another form of development simply by stopping another form. It doesn't quite work like that. Restricting hotels, co-living, build-to-rent units will not actually have an impact in terms of a desired effect of creating more houses for people to buy or affordable homes. It doesn't quite work like that. It's because developers of those particular asset classes have different funding models and different business models than the ones who would be providing houses. Stopping one form of development doesn't make another form of development more profitable or more affordable. COVID-19 aside, we do not have enough hotel rooms in Dublin City, hence the demand for development that was there previously. The more hotel rooms we have will actually improve the affordability of hotel rooms within the city and also reduce the level of demand for apartments for Airbnb and ultimately providing more apartments into the general market. Co-living is not there to be a long-term solution. It's there for people who are moving into the city from either from the country or from abroad, who need to find a location quickly for their employment point of view and are happy to live in a co-living scenario for a few months till they find their feet. It also gives them an opportunity to meet people within the city as well. Build-to-rent apartment blocks are common in major cities all around the world. In terms of a percentage point of view, we're very low on them in Dublin and therefore we probably need more. Professionally managed serviced apartments are a good thing for the city. They will overall increase the supply of the residential stock, which is not a bad thing. And this frees up more traditional homes to be sold to owner-occupiers. And it is important to understand that building something like an office block, co-living, hotel, a build-to-rent apartment blocks can always be forward sold or forward funded in terms of leases. Therefore, it allows the developer to actually sell on the project, allows them for cheaper finance, well before they've even started construction. However, that can't be said when you are providing homes to the owner-occupier market. Generally speaking, you need to be far more on in terms of the project before you can start selling units. You also have to sell those units to individual buyers, which increases the risk. And also the likelihood is you're not getting the same credit terms, which makes the whole project far more risky. There are a lot of schemes there from the government, from the Help to Buy scheme to the new scheme with the shared equity, that is there to help with supply because they're trying to make sites more feasible to develop. However, they have a knock-on effect by increasing demand even more. And because they're increasing demand more than they're actually increasing supply, they're having an impact on price, which is driving prices even higher. And that is making it even less affordable for people to get onto the property ladder. To create more affordable homes, we really need to be looking at the cost of supply. And there are a number of solutions that could be put in very quickly by the government to actually make that happen. The first solution is let's remove 13.5% VAT from new builds that are aimed at affordable homeowners. That in most cases could reduce the home price by 30 to 40,000. Also, let's remove council contributions for homes that are aimed at affordable homeowners as well. That would reduce, that could have savings up to 14,000. Also, Ireland has one of the highest design standards in terms of size for apartments across Europe at the moment. A small decrease in those standard sizes for affordable homes, even as much as 10 square meters, could have a saving of 25,000 per unit. Also, in terms of Ireland and Dublin, there's a huge requirement from a planning point of view to provide car parking spaces within apartment blocks. Because of the way land values are, in a lot of cases what has to happen from a planning point of view and from a land use point of view is the car parking spaces have to be underground, and in most cases in Dublin City they are double underground car parking spaces. This means that a huge amount of cost goes into the foundations of creating these apartment blocks and creating these car parking spaces. It's estimated that the average cost of creating a car parking space within a double height basement car park is €75,000. If you were to take all of those into play, you removed your VAT at 13.5%, you removed your council contributions, both of those are government costs, you reduced the standard size by 10 square metres, and you reduce the requirement for car parking, which, let's face it, in most major cities around the world, car parking isn't that required anymore because car usage is falling with younger generations. If you were to take all of that out, you would have a saving of €154,000 on the cost of providing an apartment within a city centre. And I think that's worth thinking about because that's a huge saving, and technically speaking there's about 50 odd thousand of that is relating to government costs associated with buying a house. And if you strip that out, I would say I'd be far happier if I was buying a house that I wasn't paying 50 odd grand to the government rather than them giving me 50 grand for a shared equity scheme. The second solution is around REITs and pension funds and these built-to-rent apartment complexes. There is a lot of negative press around them. I perhaps might get some criticism for raising it here, but I don't believe they're part of the problem. I actually think they can become part of the solution. There's a lot of tax issues that people raise all the time, but it is important to remember that REITs are set up in such a way that they don't pay tax and they have to pass out 50% of their rental income in way of dividend every year. So therefore, the shareholders are paying tax on the dividend every year up to capital gains of 33%. Individuals can set up schemes like this themselves. From a pension point of view, it is probably one of the best ways to buy property is through your pension. You won't pay any tax on your rent. So this loophole that people complain that REITs are using, it's also available for individuals if they want to set up a pension in that manner. However, onto actually the solution, because regardless of any kind of clever tax loopholes that people might want to use, that's not going to be part of the solution. What actually can be part of the solution is, while there is a demand out there in terms of Ireland and there's lots of people willing to invest in Ireland and develop these build-to-rent apartment schemes, we should be encouraging to do so, because there is definitely a lack of supply from the residential rental point of view as well. So why would we try stop them? I think we should be encouraging to do it. But what we should look to do is maybe take 10 to 20% of the apartments that they do create, perhaps on the lower floors. They mightn't have to be as big, or it mightn't have to be as luxurious in terms of their fit out, but we should be requiring them that 10 or 20% of them are available at a capped rent and are also available to people perhaps on a set income, or civil servants such as guards, nurses or teachers who are providing a service within the community. I think that is a far better use of trying to provide additional rental stock into the market, and also taking advantage of the fact that there's huge demand out there to provide these types of buildings. So rather than trying to criticise or stop these type of investments and these developments happening, why don't we encourage them? But while we're encouraging them, actually take a percentage of them to make sure that a percentage of them are provided to low income or medium income earners who are renting in the city, or who are civil servants working in the city as well. The third solution is around vacant properties. There's a lot of talk right now in regards to taxing vacant properties, trying to bring them back into the market. I kind of feel that taxing vacant properties won't get you the desired outcome that you require. We've seen it all the time. I don't think taxing it is actually going to create any large increase in supply, because once you take out all the units that are perhaps in probate or family members are in care, as well as all the vacant buildings that are being left vacant because they're part of a much larger development play, and refurbishing them for a few years while that development play is being worked out, just isn't economical. So what you're left with then is probably units, especially around city centres and towns, are units above retail. In a lot of cases, it is not practical from a landlord and tenant point of view to fit out the upper floors because perhaps the ground floor has been let on a 20-year lease or 25-year lease and there's no direct access to the upper floors. Perhaps there is access to the upper floors, but converting it into residential is a difficult task because it will not comply with building regs or fire regs that easy. I've been involved in a number of feasibility studies where we've looked at commercial units to try convert them back into residential units. I've been quite passionate about these schemes and would really love a lot of them to actually come to fruition, but the problem is when you try comply our current building regs and our current planning regs to these older type buildings, sometimes it is just not feasible or not economical to make the changes to the property. And there are a lot of physical issues that just can't be overcome when you're looking at converting some of these older commercial buildings into residential. One of the big ones is providing additional fire escapes. Sometimes it's next to impossible to provide additional fire escapes within some of these buildings because perhaps the ground floor is leased to a large tenant and there is no way they're going to go and give up some of their retail space for an additional few stairwells coming into their demise. The other issue is a lot of times you may not have access to the rear to create a fire exit to the rear, and certainly Dublin City Council aren't going to be allowing you to put fire escapes at the front of these buildings either. So therefore, applying a new tax to vacant buildings won't make it any more feasible to provide residential units within these commercial buildings or these commercial vacant buildings. So realistically, the solution has to be around incentives. There are some incentives in regards to some of the cities around the country in terms of live-in cities where you can get your refurb costs back over a number of years. There has to be some sort of give and take with the building regs and fire regs to allow these buildings to come back into use. Because under the current building regs and fire regs, it's just not feasible to make it happen. And if you tax it, it's just going to make it even harder to happen. In terms of the new buildings that are built to rent buildings and may have vacant units in them at the moment, most of the city centre is empty at the moment in terms of vacant rental units. There's a huge amount of vacant rental units all around the city. It's not just REITs or pension funds that have vacant units. There's a huge amount of vacant units all around the city. But everyone believes that this is a short-term thing. Everyone believes that these units will be full again once the vaccine is widely distributed and once people start getting back to work. Trying to tax them now in the short term is probably just going to have a negative impact long term, because once you start going down the road of kind of issuing kind of emergency taxes, these international funds see this and they say, well, we don't want to invest in Dublin anymore, and that could have a long-term knock-on effect in terms of the amount of units that are actually brought to the market in the future. So solution 4 is around starter apartments within the city centre. This could be a little bit controversial and some councillors and politicians certainly won't like them. However, they actually do give a great opportunity to councillors and politicians, because they can cut the ribbon on these new developments quickly, because they can happen and be built quickly if they're built modular. So what I mean by this is there should be a new building standard to provide starter homes or starter apartments for people who are in the city and want to buy in the city. These have worked well in other cities that are extremely expensive to buy in, such as London. They were rejected for a long time, but once a few of them have been rolled out, they have taken on. People have got behind them, because effectively what you're doing is you're building a smaller, compact, better designed apartment, but it's cheaper. It's cheaper construction in terms of a modular construction, and therefore it is sold to people who are on an affordable homes list that can get themselves onto the property ladder. They, in the future, can only sell it to people who are on the same list or people who are in the same category as them. The prices will go up in line with the overall price index for property, but this gives people who are in their young 20s an opportunity to get on the property ladder early. And rather than paying rent, they are paying down their mortgage and they're growing in equity. So when they want to go and buy a larger apartment or a larger home outside the city, they have built up equity within their property by paying down the mortgage, and they can use that equity to go off and get another mortgage. Solution number 5 is the planning system. The planning system has to be reworked. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing for any government to take on because it's there for years. But realistically, we're always going to have a housing crisis if we can't sort out our planning process. At the moment, we create development plans. Those development plans are there for 6 years. However, even though those development plans are created by the council, when you go into the council and you have a scheme that matches their development plan exactly, ticks all the boxes in terms of what they've outlined that they want to see, they still turn around to you and say, no, we're not happy with it. Actually, what we want is something completely different. And actually, the thing that we have in the development plan is not quite what we want at all. This happens because sometimes councillors and TDs get involved and their mood can change all the time depending on what the press is like in terms of what they're going to support and what they're not going to support. What we need is a long-term plan for each local area in each city, and that should be the guide for the planning authority to work off. They shouldn't be going into meetings with developers or architects and saying, well, actually the mood of the councillors or the mood of the TDs this week is something different and we're not going to allow hotels anymore, or we're not going to allow build to rent anymore. That can't happen. There has to be a scheme that developers, architects, builders, the council and the planning authority need to know that they're working off a fixed scheme, and it can't have so much impact by the press or local TDs who change their mind depending on where they're thinking they're going to get their next vote. While changing the planning process may take years or decades to actually do, what we can do, or what we should be doing quickly, is bringing out new building regs. We are working off just a set few building regs in terms of certain types of designs that everyone should be following. Realistically, that's not going to solve, or that's not going to provide any affordable units, because the building regs that are there are generally very high-end luxury apartments that people are working off. And the only way you can build in line with those building regs is to actually provide luxury apartments, which will have to be sold at 400, 500, 600,000. So that's not going to provide a solution for affordable homes. There needs to be multiple design standards for different types of accommodation. None of these solutions are that straightforward, but they're not that complex either. And what I've really tried to do in this video is really aim them at the supply side, or trying to improve supply without actually increasing demand. Because a lot of the schemes that are coming out at the moment are maybe slightly aimed at supply, but because we have such a strange supply curve within Dublin, which I've explained in another video, I'll leave a link to it somewhere up here. Basically what happens is any kind of increase in demand will have a massive knock-on effect on price, and we are so slow in terms of increasing supply, and therefore prices will just go up far quicker than supply can ever meet that demand. These are just a few ideas. There are loads more. I'm sure other people have loads of ideas as well on how to try resolve the housing crisis. I'd love to hear from you. Put your comments below. Let me know what your ideas are. Let me know what your comments are on the ideas I've put forward here. My ideas aren't that new, they aren't that revolutionary, they're not that complex, but they're not that straightforward either. But they can be actually put into practice very quickly. There's none of them that actually would take a huge amount of time to actually get the ball rolling on them and increase supply. However, other than the planning, reworking our whole planning system, but something should start on that. It's just very frustrating for anyone who is looking at the housing crisis and realizing that our major issue is the planning process. It's just far too outdated for our needs as a country and as a city. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. And as always, thanks for watching, and make sure you put your comments below.